The answer for every challenge you're facing is to grow. And I want to talk to you about what happens when you don't. There's a wonderful passage in Matthew chapter 17. I want to read to you beginning in verse 14 of some good people who had done some good things, but they were desperately in need of growing. And if I could, let me ask you just to stand with me as I read this wonderful account from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 17. It says, when they reached the crowd, a man approached and knelt down before him. Lord, he said, have mercy on my son, because he has seizures and suffers terribly. He often falls into the fire and often into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't heal him. Jesus replied, you unbelieving and perverse generation, how long will I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring him here to me. Then Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and from that moment the boy was healed. Then the disciples approached Jesus privately and said, why couldn't we drive it out? Because of your little faith, he told them. For truly, I tell you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will tell this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Thank you. Be seated. Now, if you know the story from this passage, you'll know that right before this is the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus goes with 3 of his disciples up onto the mountain and meets with God the Father, meets with Elijah, meets with Moses, but he sends 9 of his disciples into a nearby village. And while those 9 disciples are in the village, a desperate father comes running up to them. And he tells them, in the Gospel of Luke, it says it was his only child. And this child had an evil spirit, and the evil spirit would come upon this child at any moment, in the night or in the day, and cast that boy to the ground. He might fall into the fire. He might fall into the water and be in danger of drowning. And this poor father and his family lived in constant terror, never knowing when that evil spirit might come upon their only child. But one day, this father heard that there were 9 of Jesus' disciples there in his village. He'd heard that the disciples of Jesus had the power of God. And so he sought them out and came and he fell to his knees and he begged them and said, please, please set my boy free. And we don't know all that happened, but apparently all 9 of them had failed to set that boy free. They tried, they did what they could, and they all failed. Now, what's puzzling is that in Matthew chapter 10, verse 1, Jesus gathers his 12 disciples together, and he gives them power and authority to do this very thing, to have victory over evil spirits, to heal those who are sick. So we know that they were given the power. And the Gospels tell us that they had success. They had cast out evil spirits before. And so what we can assume is that having had success before, when this father came with his little boy, those 9 disciples probably thought to themselves, well, we've done this many times before. We've had plenty of success in the past. This shouldn't be difficult. But apparently, this was difficult. It was more difficult than anything these disciples had ever faced. And folks, can I just tell you something that I'm sure you already know? But some point in your life, you will get to the end of yourself. There will come a point in your life when you're going to face something more difficult than you've ever faced before. And you might have had success for years. And you might have had many things go your way. But one day, you're going to stand face to face with a problem that's too difficult for you. It might be a person, a relationship. It might be a financial pressure. It might be a boss at work. But something in your life is going to be too big for you. And in that moment, you've got to decide one of 2 things. You're either going to have to grow, and you're going to have to become a bigger man and woman of God than you've ever been, a greater father, a greater mother, or you're going to quit. You're going to have to give up. You're going to have to say, it's impossible. I know so many people I've met over the years who came and they said, Richard, I tried. I did my best. But it wasn't enough. Folks, let me tell you something. People don't need your best. They need God's best. Sometimes our problem is all we're giving people is our best, and our best isn't good enough. We need God to raise the level of our best to another level than it is right now. I have people say, well, I gave it my best shot. Well, sometimes our shot needs better aim, doesn't it? Sometimes our best shot just isn't good enough. These disciples, they said, we did our best. And then they walked away. Folks, I don't know what it is that you have given up on. It might be an area of your life. I've heard people say, I've been trying to lose weight for years, and it just never works out for me. I've been trying to get better at prayer, but I just have never been good at it. I have this bad habit in my life. I've tried to get victory over it, but it just doesn't work out. Or maybe it's a person. Maybe there's a relationship that's broken, and you would say, well, I reached out and tried to be reconciled, but they wouldn't even return my calls. Or you have a prodigal son or a prodigal daughter or granddaughter, and you prayed for them for years to return to the Lord, but they just seem to go farther and farther away, and at a certain point, you just stop praying. You say, I prayed for 10 years, nothing happened. I tried for 10 years, nothing got any better. I did the best that I could, and it wasn't enough. People, I'm telling you, America needs God's people to not give America its best, but to give America God's best. Your family doesn't need your best, it needs God's best. And don't walk away and say, well, I did all I could, and nothing changed. See, that's what these disciples did. They were walking away. And do you notice Jesus' response? Do you notice what he says? In verse 17, he says, you unbelieving and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Folks, does that sound like the loving Jesus that you and I know? It doesn't sound like him, does it? Why is he being so harsh? I'm just speculating because it doesn't say clearly why, but this is my guess. Jesus sees a little boy writhing on the ground in bondage, and he sees 9 of his disciples sheepishly trying to leave the premises. And Jesus looks as if to say, you mean you were just going to walk away? You mean you were going to quit? You were going to leave that boy in that condition and just go on to the next village? You were going to leave that father in tears and just tell him your son's case is hopeless? Oh, unbelieving and perverse generation. You see, when God's people give up on someone, they're in a hopeless condition, are they not? You see, the whole world can give up on things. The world can give up on the nation. The world can give up on prodigals. The world can give up on hopeless sinners. But the church can't, because we know the power of God. And we know that with God, all things are possible. When you give up on someone, what you're saying is even God could not help that person. When you give up on a problem, you're saying that problem was too big even for God. And Jesus saw 9 disciples sheepishly trying to go away and say, sorry, we did the best we could. And then Jesus is saying, you get back over here. We're not leaving till this young boy is set free.